The humid New Orleans night was shattered by a sound no one expected. A scream, then another, inside a small grocery on the corner. A dark figure stood over a sleeping couple, an axe in hand. This was the work of the Axeman, and for the city of New Orleans, it was only the beginning. Between May 1918 and October 1919, a phantom killer haunted the city, leaving a trail of terror and crime scenes so bizarre they defied explanation. Although some attacks may have occurred earlier, this was a period the city held its breath. The attacker, dubbed the Axeman, broke into homes in the dead of night, attacked his victims as they slept, and then vanished as mysteriously as he appeared. The police were baffled, the public was terrified, and the killer remained a ghost, a terrifying legend whispered in the gaslit streets. For over a century, the Axeman's identity has remained one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. But what if the clues to unmask him were there all along? What if investigators, in their desperation, overlooked the very evidence that could have led them right to his door? These are the 7 chilling clues police missed that could have stopped the Axeman's reign of terror. Every predator has a method, a ritual they repeat. For the Axeman, it was how he entered his victims' homes. In most cases, he didn't smash a window or kick down a door. Instead, he would carefully chisel out a lower wooden panel of the back door. The panel, and sometimes the chisel itself, would be left neatly on the floor, a quiet announcement of his arrival. This was his calling card, a consistent and highly unusual method of entry that linked the crimes. So, where did the police go wrong? They acknowledged the pattern, but they failed to truly use it. While criminal profiling as we know it didn't exist, they didn't use this signature to narrow down the type of suspect they were looking for. It wasn't always his method. One victim was reached through an open window, but the pattern was undeniable. Think about it. Using a chisel suggests skill with tools, pointing to a tradesman, a carpenter, or a laborer. The choice to chisel a low panel suggests someone patient, deliberate, and bent on avoiding noise. Instead of creating a profile of a methodical, tool-proficient killer, investigators were left chasing shadows. They saw the what, but they completely missed the who it pointed to. This distinct entry method was the first major clue that was tragically underutilized. In the terrifying theater of the Axeman's crimes, one of the most chilling details was the weapon itself. The killer rarely brought his own weapon. Instead, he would use an axe or another blunt object that he found on the victim's property, in their backyard, their woodshed, or even their house. After committing the horrific act, he would simply leave the bloody weapon behind at the scene. This is a monumental clue. A serial attacker who doesn't bring a murder weapon is almost unheard of. It suggests a high-risk, impulsive, yet eerily confident predator. Police in the 21st century would immediately see this as a goldmine for psychological profiling. But in 1918, it was a missed opportunity. The axes were collected, but the investigation into their origins was often superficial. They were simply the victim's property, and that's where the inquiry often ended. Little effort was made to analyze why the killer chose this method. Was it part of the thrill? A way to avoid being caught carrying a weapon through the streets? Police could have canvassed neighborhoods, asking if anyone had seen a prowler scoping out yards or sheds before an attack. This failure to bring a weapon was a glaring piece of the puzzle, but investigators failed to see the picture it was forming. The murder of Joseph and Catherine Maggio on May 23, 1918, launched the city into a full-blown panic. Their throats had been slit with a straight razor before they were bludgeoned with an axe. The scene was a bloodbath. As police processed the horror, a key piece of evidence was found, but not by them. A blood-stained razor was discovered on the lawn of a neighboring property. The razor belonged to the victim's own brother, a barber named Andrew Maggio, who had taken it home for repairs. This immediately cast suspicion on Andrew, and he was even arrested before being released. But the real police failure here wasn't just focusing on the wrong man. It was their sloppy crime scene processing. The fact that the razor was found on a neighbor's property suggests the killer fled that way. A thorough search of that property and the surrounding area should have been the first priority. But police at the time often conducted only brief searches of the immediate area. This blood-soaked razor, a critical link in the chain of evidence, highlighted a much larger problem. Investigators weren't properly securing and searching the perimeters, allowing the Axeman to slip away time and time again. In any murder investigation, the first question detectives ask is why? Motive is the engine of the crime. And in the Axeman case, that engine was completely silent. In every single canonical attack, despite the savage violence, nothing of value was ever stolen. Money was left on dressers, jewelry lay untouched, and cash registers in the grocery stores were full. Robbery was clearly not the motive. This is a critical, defining characteristic of the case. It tells you the killer wasn't driven by financial gain, but by something much darker: rage, psychological compulsion, or a targeted vendetta. This should have radically shaped the investigation. It ruled out the vast majority of common criminals. Yet, police repeatedly fell back on familiar, but wrong, theories. They arrested people based on flimsy evidence, like alleged mafia connections, all of which presumed a logical, financially driven motive. They failed to grasp that they were hunting a different kind of monster, one who wasn't after money, but after lives. This single, consistent fact was perhaps the most important clue to the Axeman psychology. By not giving it the weight it deserved, police were looking for the wrong kind of person from the very beginning. In the chaos of an Axeman attack, a few victims survived to tell the tale. Their accounts should have been the key to his identity. Instead, they became a source of confusion. Survivors and witnesses gave wildly conflicting descriptions. Some described a dark-skinned, heavy-set man in a dark suit, while others claimed he was a white, working-class man. The details were always vague and inconsistent. The most tragic example of this was the case of Rosie Cortimiglia, after the Axeman attacked her family, killing her 2-year-old daughter. A traumatized and recovering Rosie was allegedly pressured by police into identifying her neighbors, Irlando and Frank Giordano, as the attackers. There was no physical evidence, only Rosie's coerced accusation. The Giordanos were convicted, with Frank sentenced to hang. It was a gross miscarriage of justice. Months later, Rosie recanted her testimony, admitting she had never actually seen her attacker clearly. The Giordanos were eventually freed, but the damage was done. The police had spent months chasing the wrong men, all while the real Axeman remained free. This incident reveals a profound failure to handle the testimony of traumatized witnesses. They took an accusation at face value, eager for a conviction to calm the city, rather than critically examining the state of a grieving, injured mother. This blind spot not only ruined innocent lives, but allowed the guilty one to escape. This next clue is shrouded in rumor and the fog of time, but it's too chilling to ignore. After the brutal murder of the Maggios, some sources claim police discovered a cryptic, taunting message written in chalk on a nearby sidewalk. It reportedly read, "Mrs. Maggio will sit up tonight just like Mrs. Tony." If true, this message was a bombshell. It was direct communication from the killer, brazenly taunting the police. More importantly, it seemed to explicitly link the Maggio murder to a previous, unsolved murder of a woman connected to a Mr. Tony, suggesting this was a serial predator keeping score and relishing his infamy. This was a psychological clue of the highest order, offering a glimpse into the killer's arrogance. But astonishingly, the clue was not thoroughly investigated or connected to other evidence in a meaningful way. The link was noted but not aggressively pursued as a key to unlocking the Axeman's patterns. While the message's authenticity is debated, the fact that such a taunt could be rumored at all and not definitively chased down shows the chaos of an investigation struggling to connect the dots. The single greatest failure of the Axeman investigation, the one that encompasses all the others, was a consistent and baffling lack of basic forensic rigor. Time and again, police failed to properly secure and search the crime scenes. We already saw this with the bloody razor, but the problem was much bigger. Axes were found in the backyard, instead of being immediately secured. Bloody clothes left by the killer were found, but yielded no useful information in an era before DNA analysis. In multiple attacks, the primary focus was on removing the victims, and the subsequent search for evidence was often incomplete. This failure meant that countless potential clues were likely lost forever. Fingerprints, footprints, fibers, or other items that a modern CSI team would find in minutes were simply overlooked. The Axeman's ability to enter, attack, and escape without leaving a clear trace wasn't because he was a forensic genius. It was often because no one was conducting a sufficiently detailed search. This systemic failure is a tragic, overarching reason why the Axeman was never caught. The clues were there, lying in the grass, left on the floorboards, and maybe even scrawled in chalk on the sidewalk. But the eyes that should have seen them were looking in all the wrong places. The Axeman's reign of terror eventually stopped as mysteriously as it began, after the murder of Mike Pepitone in October 1919, which is widely considered his final act. The attack ceased. The killer faded from a terrifying reality into a dark New Orleans legend. His infamous letter, threatening to kill again unless the city filled its homes with the sound of jazz music, secured his place as one of the most bizarre killers of all time. But the mystery of his identity might not have been so mysterious if investigators had pieced together the clues he left behind. The chiseled door panels, the borrowed axes, the lack of robbery, the taunting messages. These were the breadcrumbs that could have led to his capture. Because of a series of investigative failures, a killer walked free, and over a century later, we are still left asking, who was the Axeman? What do you think is the most compelling theory in the Axeman case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy diving into history's darkest mysteries, please consider liking and subscribing for our next investigation.